Lena Matthews sat at the kitchen table, staring out the window as the morning sun spread across the quiet neighborhood. The house felt too empty, too still. Her husband, Tom, had been working in another city for the past few months, coming home only on weekends. She told herself she was fine, but the truth was, the silence was starting to wear her down. She missed talking to someone, even if it was about small things like dinner plans or the weather. She stirred her coffee slowly, lost in thought, when the sound of footsteps made her glance toward the hallway. It was Ekdom's son from his first marriage. He had come to stay for the summer, taking a break before heading back to college. He was polite, always respectful, and kept mostly to himself. Their conversations were short, usually about chores or food. Lena had never really gotten to know him beyond that. "Morning," Ethan said with a sleepy smile, running a hand through his messy brown hair. "You heading into town today?" Lena nodded. "Yeah, I need to get some groceries and pick up a few things." He hesitated for a moment, then said, "Mind if I ride along? I could use a few supplies for my car project." His request caught her off guard. They'd never gone anywhere together, just the two of them. Still, she didn't want to sound distant. "Sure," she said with a small smile. "I could use some company." He smiled back, and for a moment she noticed how much he resembled his father, more thoughtful somehow. She pushed that thought away and grabbed her keys. The drive started quietly. The car hummed along the familiar country road that led into Cedar Hill, a small town surrounded by rolling green fields. At first, the silence between them felt uncertain, as if neither knew what to say. But soon the quiet started to feel comfortable, almost peaceful. Ethan rolled the window down slightly, letting in the warm breeze. "You always take this road?" he asked. "Every time," Lena said. "It's the long way, but it's calm. I like the quiet." He nodded. "Yeah, I get that. College gets so loud sometimes. Everyone's talking, partying. Sometimes silence feels like the best sound." Lena smiled faintly. "That's a wise thought for someone your age." Ethan grinned. "Guess I take after Dad that way." The mention of Tom made her glance away for a moment. She missed him more than she wanted to admit. But lately, when they spoke on the phone, he sounded distracted, always in a rush. Sometimes she wondered if he even noticed how distant things had become. At the grocery store, Ethan helped her carry the bags, joking about how much she bought. "You're stocking up for an army," he said, laughing. "An army of one," she replied with a playful sigh. "But I'll take the help." It was a small moment, but something about it felt easy, natural. They grabbed coffee afterward, sitting by the window of a small cafe that overlooked the street. Ethan talked about his classes, his plans, his dreams. He wanted to design cars, one-darial ones, fast ones. Lena listened, impressed by how much passion he had in his voice. "Tom never mentioned how much you love cars," she said. He smiled. "We don't talk much about stuff like that. He's more the practical type. You know, work, bills, routines." Lena nodded, understanding too well. "That's true." He's focused. There was a pause. Not awkward, just quiet. A kind of silence that carried meaning. For the first time, she felt like she was seeing Ethan not just as her stepson, but as a person with his own world, his own feelings. He wasn't the quiet boy who used to stay in his room anymore. He was growing into his own life. On the way back home, the sun dipped lower, filling the car with warm golden light. Ethan leaned back in his seat, humming along to the soft music playing on the radio. The road curved gently through the trees, and Lena felt strangely calm. "You know," Ethan said suddenly, "you and Dad have been together a while now. How do you make it work when he's gone so much?" The question caught her off guard. "That's a good question," she said after a moment. "I guess you've just learned to wait. You'll learn to trust that the distance doesn't mean the love is gone. Some days, it's easier. Some days, not so much." He looked at her, thoughtful. "You sound lonely sometimes." His words were gentle, not accusing, but they still struck something inside her. She kept her eyes on the road. "Everyone gets lonely, Ethan, even when they're surrounded by people." He nodded quietly, as if he understood more than he should. "Yeah, I know that feeling too." When they reached a red light near the edge of town, the car slowed to a stop. Lena looked at the side mirror, then at Ethan. For a split second, their eyes met. It wasn't a long stare, just a moment where neither spoke, but both seemed to feel something shift. She looked away quickly, her hands tightening on the wheel. "You'll have to remind me to pick up gas next time," she said, her voice softer than before. "Sure," he replied, still watching her carefully. The light turned green and the car rolled forward. Neither said another word for the rest of the drive. But something unspoken filled the air between them, a quiet awareness that neither could name. By the time they reached the driveway, the sun was nearly gone. Lena parked the car, her heart beating faster than usual for reasons she didn't understand. Ethan grabbed the grocery bags from the back and carried them inside without being asked. "Thanks for the ride," he said once everything was unpacked. "It was nice. We should do that again sometime." Lena smiled, though her chest felt heavy. "Yeah," she said softly. "We should." He gave a small nod, then went upstairs to his room. She stood there for a moment, staring at the doorway he disappeared through, feeling a strange mix of peace and confusion. That evening, as she sat alone on the couch, she thought about the drive, the laughter, the sunlight, the way Ethan had looked at her when he spoke. There was nothing wrong in it, nothing improper, yet it lingered in her mind more than she wanted it to. It had been so long since she'd felt truly seen, so long since someone had listened to her voice without distraction. As the night settled in and the house grew quiet again, Lena whispered to herself it was just a car ride. But deep down she knew it was more than that. Something subtle had changed, something that neither of them expected, yet both somehow felt. And though she tried to brush it away, the memory of that peaceful drive stayed with her, gentle, warm, and quietly unsettling. That simple morning decision to let Ethan ride along had opened a door she didn't even realize existed. A door to emotions she thought she had locked away long ago. What happened next would test everything she thought she understood about love, loyalty, and the quiet spaces between two hearts that were never meant to cross. The next morning, the air felt softer, lighter. Lena woke up earlier than usual, still thinking about the drive from the day before. It had been simple, just errands, small talk, but something about it had left an echo in her heart. She couldn't explain it, and she didn't want to read too much into it. Still, when she heard Ethan moving around in the garage, a quiet smile formed on her face before she even realized it. By noon, she decided to drive into town again to pick up a few things she'd forgotten. As she grabbed her purse, Ethan appeared at the door, wiping his hands with a rag. "Heading back to town?" he asked. She nodded. "Just for a bit. You need anything?" He hesitated, then said, "Mind if I tag along again? I could use a break." Something inside her tightened, not with fear, but with awareness. She hesitated, then smiled softly. "Sure, let's go." The drive started with easy silence. The car hummed along the familiar road, sunlight flickering through the trees. Ethan leaned back, tapping his fingers lightly on his knee, humming along to the radio. Lena focused on the road, but her mind kept drifting to how natural it felt having him there beside her. After a few minutes, he broke the silence. "You know, yesterday was nice. I don't remember the last time I felt that calm." She smiled. It was nice. Sometimes the best moments are the quiet ones. He looked at her, his expression sincere. "You really believe that, don't you?" "Yes," she said. "Peace isn't found in noise. It's in silence, in people who make you feel safe in it." For a second, neither spoke. The words hung in the air, gentle but heavy with meaning. Ethan nodded slowly. "I like that. You always say things that make sense in a quiet way." Lena laughed softly. "That's a polite way of calling me boring." "Not boring," he said quickly. "Just grounded. I think people forget how comforting that can be." She didn't reply, but her chest tightened with something she couldn't name. His words weren't flirtatious or inappropriate, they were simply kind. But that kindness touched something inside her that had been asleep for too long. When they reached town, they stopped at a hardware store. While Ethan looked for parts for his car, Lena waited by the counter. She watched him talk to the clerk, confident, polite. with a boyish smile that reminded her of the man Tom used to be when they first met. It wasn't attraction she felt, not exactly. It was more like nostalgia, bittersweet reminder of what warmth and attention used to feel like afterward. They grabbed coffee from the same cafe as before. The place was small and quiet, filled with the smell of roasted beans and the soft hum of conversation. They sat near the window again, sunlight pouring over their table. Ethan talked about his mother, about how distant she'd become since remarrying. "I used to think I was angry at her," he said, stirring his coffee. "But I think I was just hurt. I wanted her to care like she used to." Lena nodded, her voice soft. "Parents are human too, Ethan. Sometimes they're just trying to survive in their own pain." He looked at her carefully. "Is that how you survive too?" The question hit deeper than he intended. For a second, she didn't know what to say. Then she smiled faintly. "Maybe. We all find ways to keep going. Mine just happens to be pretending everything's fine." He gave a sad smile. "You don't have to pretend with me." That line, though simple, carried a weight that neither could ignore. She looked down at her cup, avoiding his gaze. "You're kind," she said quietly. "Don't lose that." They drove home as the sun began to set. The sky turned golden, then pink, then a deep orange glow that wrapped everything in warmth. Lena took the long road again, the one that curved through the woods. She didn't want the drive to end. Ethan leaned his arm on the open window, wind brushing through his hair. "You ever think about what makes people happy?" he asked suddenly. "All the time," she said. "But I don't think happiness is something you chase. It's something that finds you when you stop trying so hard." He smiled. "I think you're right. Yesterday, I was just a bored college kid. Today, I feel like I actually learned something." Lena laughed lightly. "From me, I'm not sure I'm the best teacher." "Maybe not the best," he teased, "but definitely the most real." She shook her head, smiling despite herself. The way he said things so honest, so unfiltered, made her feel seen. It was a strange comfort, one she hadn't expected. When they stopped at a red light, the world around them seemed to pause. The car was quiet, the air still. The golden light reflected on Ethan's face, and she noticed how grown he looked, not the awkward teenager she once knew, but a young man learning who he was. "Ethan," she said softly, "college changes people. Just promise me you'll stay true to who you are." He looked at her, his expression calm but serious. "I'll try. But I think I already changed a little." "How so?" He hesitated, then said, "I used to think love was just something people fell into. But maybe it's more about the people who make you feel at peace. Like being around them feels right, even when you're not talking." Her chest tightened again. She didn't know what to say, so she simply nodded, pretending to focus on the road. The moment lingered like a whisper neither of them wanted to end. When they reached the house, the light was fading fast. Ethan got out of the car, but before walking away, he leaned down slightly toward the open window. "Thanks for the ride, Lena. I know it's just a drive, but it meant something." She looked up at him, her voice quiet. "It meant something to me, too." He smiled, nodded, and walked toward the garage. Lena sat there for a while, her hands still on the steering wheel, staring at the empty driveway. Her heart was calm, but her thoughts were storming. Inside, she poured herself another cup of coffee, even though it was late. The memory of his words replayed in her head. "You don't have to pretend with me." It was simple, but it reached deeper than any conversation she'd had in months. That night, she lay awake in bed, listening to the rain tapping softly on the windows. Her phone buzzed a text from Tom. "Working late again. Love you." She typed back, "Love you too," then put the phone aside. But her mind didn't stay on Tom. It wandered to the golden sunset. The quiet laughter in the car, and the way Ethan's voice had sounded when he said she didn't have to pretend. Lena didn't understand why it mattered so much, but it did. It wasn't about romance or temptation. It was about feeling alive again, seen, heard, understood. She closed her eyes, trying to shake the thought, but her heart wouldn't let it go. That car ride had started as a simple trip to town. But now it felt like the beginning of something deeper, quiet change neither of them expected. And both were trying not to feel. The evening air was calm, carrying the scent of summer rain that had fallen earlier. The world felt washed clean, but Lena's heart was far from settled. Since that last drive, her thoughts had been restless. Every quiet moment seemed to bring Ethan's voice back, his kindness, his words, his way of looking at her like she mattered. She told herself it was just a harmless bond, a connection between two lonely people. But deep down, she knew it was more complicated than that. That night, Tom called. "Hey, sweetheart," he said, his voice tired and distant. "I'll be staying a few more days." Big project came up. Lena forced a cheerful tone. "That's okay. Work's important. I'll make it up to you when I'm back," he promised, but his words sounded more like habit than love. They talked for a few minutes before he hung up, leaving her with that familiar emptiness again. She sat in silence, staring at the wall. Wondering when marriage had become so lonely, through the window she saw light from the garage. Ethan was out there again, probably working on his car. She hesitated, then decided to bring him a glass of lemonade. It was a simple gesture, but maybe company was what they both needed. When she stepped into the garage, the warm scent of oil and metal filled the air. Ethan looked up from the open hood, his face slightly smudged, but his smile genuine. "Hey, Lena," he said. "You didn't have to come out here." "I brought you something to drink," she replied, handing him the glass. Their fingers brushed briefly, and she pulled back quickly, trying not to think about it. "Thanks," he said, taking a sip. "You're a lifesaver." She leaned against the workbench, watching him tighten a bolt. "You really love this stuff, don't you?" He nodded. "Yeah, it keeps my mind busy. Makes me feel like I can fix something, you know?" She smiled faintly. "I get that. Fixing things makes you feel in control, especially when life isn't." Their eyes met, and for a long second neither looked away. The air between them shifted, heavy with unspoken thoughts. Ethan set down the wrench slowly. "You seem sad lately," he said quietly. "Is it because Dad's away so much?" She took a slow breath. "Maybe. Or maybe it's just that everything feels different now. Marriage, life, it's all quieter than I thought it would be." He nodded, understanding. "I think quiet can be lonely if it's not shared." His words hit deeper than he realized. She looked away, blinking back a sudden ache in her chest. "You shouldn't worry about me, Ethan. I'm fine." "You don't have to be," he said softly. "You're always pretending to be okay, but you don't have to do that with me." The echo of those words, the same ones he'd said in the car, made her heart tighten. She wanted to tell him he was wrong, that everything was fine. But she couldn't, because it wasn't. He stepped closer, his voice still calm but filled with sincerity. "You've done so much for everyone, Lena. But who takes care of you?" For a moment she couldn't breathe. No one had asked her that in years. She tried to speak, but only a whisper came out. "You shouldn't say things like that." "I know," he said, his tone low but firm. "But I mean them." She turned to face him, her voice trembling. "Ethan, this isn't right. You're Tom's son. I'm his wife. Whatever this feeling is, can't exist." He looked down, his jaw tightening. "I know it can't. I didn't plan to feel anything. I just do." Silence filled the garage. The rain outside began again, tapping softly on the roof. Lena felt her heart racing, torn between reason and emotion. She wanted to tell him to stop, to leave it alone, but she also wanted to thank him for seeing her, for making her feel like she wasn't invisible. Finally, she said, "You're kind, Ethan, but some feelings aren't meant to grow. They're meant to remind us we're human." He nodded, eyes glistening. "Then maybe that's all this is a reminder." They stood there quietly, both understanding that something real had passed between them, something they couldn't take back. But there was no anger, no shame, just a deep, aching sadness that such a connection could exist in the wrong place. At the wrong time, Lena took a small step back, needing to breathe. "You should rest. It's late." He smiled faintly, though his eyes were tired. "Good night, Lena." "Good night," she whispered, and turned to leave. But as she reached the door, his voice stopped her. "Lena." She turned slightly, not trusting herself to look at him fully. "I just want you to know," he said softly, "you've changed how I see people. You made me realize love isn't always about wanting. It's about understanding." Her heart ached at his honesty. "Then you've learned something very important," she said. Her voice steady, but her eyes wet. She walked back to the house, closing the door gently behind her. Once inside, she leaned against it, tears slipping down her cheeks. They weren't tears of guilt, they were of confusion, longing, and a quiet sadness for the things that could never be. That night, Lena couldn't sleep. She kept hearing his voice in her head, the softness of his words, the quiet strength in his tone. It wasn't a confession of love, not in the traditional sense, but it was something powerful. Something that reached her heart in a way she hadn't felt in years. She thought about Tom, how their love had turned into something routine, polite, distant. There was no fire, no warmth, just shared responsibilities and small talk. Ethan's words had reminded her of the woman she used to be. The one who still believed in emotion, in connection, in feeling something deeply. When morning came, she stood by the kitchen window, staring at the sunrise. Ethan walked across the yard, carrying tools, pretending like nothing had happened. She watched him for a moment, noticing the quiet sadness in his movements. Neither of them spoke about what had passed, but it lingered between them like an invisible thread, something tender and forbidden, yet strangely pure. Later that day, Ethan fixed the broken porch light. Lena brought him water, but didn't say much. They worked side by side, careful, polite, each aware of the boundary they couldn't cross. But beneath that silence was understanding, a quiet agreement that what they felt didn't need to be named to be real. As the sun went down, Ethan packed up his tools. "I'm going to start getting ready for college soon," he said, avoiding her eyes. She nodded, her voice soft. "That's good. You have a bright future ahead of you, Ethan. Don't let anything distract you from that." He smiled faintly. "I won't, but I'll never forget this summer." She managed a weak smile. "Neither will I." As he walked away, Lena stood there, watching him disappear into the dim light. Her heart felt both full and hollow. What had begun as a simple ride to town had become something much deeper. Quiet, emotional storm that neither of them wanted, but both had learned from. That night, she finally understood something. Not all love stories are meant to be lived. Some are meant to be felt, to remind us we can still care, still hope, still feel alive, and though nothing more would ever happen. That understanding between them, the unspoken, gentle truth, would stay in her heart forever. Summer was coming to an end, and the air carried a new kind of quiet. The house that had once felt too big now felt smaller, like the walls had witnessed too much and were keeping secrets. Lena moved through her days with calm efficiency, trying to focus on chores, on her work, on anything that would silence her thoughts. But no matter what she did, Ethan lingered in her mind like a soft echo she couldn't push away. Ethan was different too. He no longer joked as much or spent as many hours in the garage. He still helped around the house, still greeted her every morning. But the easy comfort they'd shared before had turned into something careful, fragile. They both knew why. After that night in the garage, the quiet confession they'd both tried to forget. Something between them had changed forever. One evening, Lena was setting the table when Tom called again. His voice was cheerful this time, talking about his return home in a few days. "It'll be good to see everyone," he said. "We'll have dinner together, just like old times." Lena smiled faintly, but it didn't reach her eyes. "That sounds nice, Tom." She hung up and stood still for a long time. "Old times," she whispered to herself. It felt like another lifetime back when everything had been simple before she learned how complicated the heart could be. Later that night, Ethan knocked softly on her door. "Hey," he said, his voice quiet. "Dad called. Said he'll be back soon." She nodded. "Yes, he did. I guess that means I'll be leaving soon too," he said. "Classes start in a week." Her throat tightened. She'd known this moment was coming, but hearing it said out loud made it real. "You must be excited to go back," she said, trying to sound steady. He gave a small smile. "Uh-huh. But it feels different this time." She looked up, their eyes meeting in the soft glow of the lamp. "Different how?" He hesitated. "I don't know. Like I grew up this summer. Like I learned things about people and myself that I didn't expect to." Lena swallowed hard. That's what growing up feels like. You start to see the world with clearer eyes. He stepped closer, keeping his distance, but still close enough for her to feel the weight of his presence. "You've taught me a lot, Lena, more than you realize." Her chest ached. "Ethan, what happened between us those moments, they can't define you. They were lessons for both of us." He nodded. "I know. But they were real too." She didn't deny it. There was no point. Truth didn't need to be repeated to be understood. It simply existed between them, spoken, honest, and bittersweet. The next morning, the sky was cloudy. Ethan loaded his car with bags, moving slowly, as if each trip from the house to the driveway took something from him. Lena helped fold his last few clothes, her hands trembling slightly as she handed him a jacket. "You'll need this," she said quietly. He took it, their fingers brushing. "Thank you for everything. Not just for this, but for being there." She forced a smile. "You don't have to thank me. Your family." He looked at her, eyes soft. "You always say that, but it feels like more than that. Like we understand each other in ways no one else does." Lena didn't respond. Instead, she looked at the car, the packed boxes, the open road waiting for him. "It's time, Ethan. You have a whole life ahead of you. Go live it." He nodded, but before getting in, he took a deep breath. "That day in the car, I think about it a lot," he said. "Not because of what it meant, but because of how it made me feel. Peaceful, seen." Eyes glistened. "Then remember it as something good. Something that helped you grow." He smiled sadly. "I will." When he hugged her goodbye, it wasn't like before. It wasn't light or quick. It was long and silent, filled with everything neither of them could say. There was no passion, no guilt, just deep emotion, pure and unspoken. A connection built not on desire, but understanding. "Goodbye, Lena," he whispered. "Goodbye, Ethan," she said, her voice barely steady. He pulled away, gave her one last look, and got into the car. The engine started, the tires crunched against the gravel, and soon the sound faded into the distance. She stood there long after he was gone, her heart heavy yet strangely calm. When Tom returned home a few days later, he noticed a change in her. She smiled, laughed when needed, cooked dinner, and asked about his work, but something in her eyes was different. Softer, quieter, wiser. He assumed it was the loneliness finally wearing off, and he was too tired to look deeper. That evening, as they sat together watching TV, Lena's mind wandered. She wasn't thinking about Ethan specifically. She was thinking about everything he had taught her. That kindness still mattered. That love could exist in quiet understanding, not just in words or promises. That being seen by someone, even for a short while, could change the way you saw yourself. Days passed, then weeks. Life settled back into rhythm. Yet sometimes, when she drove into town alone, she'd take that same long road through the trees. The one where the sunlight used to fall on the dashboard, where silence once felt full instead of empty. She'd glance at the passenger seat and smile softly to herself, remembering that peaceful ride, the one that started everything. She knew now that what she'd felt wasn't wrong, though it could never be acted on. It was human. It was the heart's quiet rebellion against emptiness. The soul's way of reminding her that she could still feel, still care, still be alive. A month later, Ethan called. His voice was lighter, happier. "Hey, Lena, I just wanted to check in. College is good. I've been working on a new design project." She smiled, relief washing over her. "That's wonderful, Ethan. I'm proud of you." There was a pause. "You sound better," he said. "More peaceful." "I think I am," she admitted. "Sometimes peace comes after letting go." He was silent for a moment, then said quietly, "Thank you for letting me be part of your story, even for a short while." Her heart warmed. And thank you for reminding me I still have one. They talked for a few more minutes about ordinary things, school, the weather, Tom's work, and then said goodbye. It was a normal conversation, yet it left her smiling long after. That night, Lena sat on the porch watching the stars. The sky stretched endlessly above her, and for the first time in a long while, she didn't feel alone. The ache in her heart had softened into something beautiful memory. A memory she would carry quietly, not as regret, but as proof that the heart can still feel deeply even when life feels routine. Ethan had entered her life as her stepson, but he had left as something more meaningful, a reminder of youth, hope, and emotional truth. And as she whispered goodnight to the still summer air, she knew one thing for certain. Not all love stories are about staying together. Some are about learning how to say goodbye with grace. The car ride that started it all had changed to lives forever, through love, but through understanding. And sometimes that's the most powerful kind of story there is.